Hi there, for those of you joining us. We're here with our fourth Insight session as part of our Launchpad series, our Insight Sessions series. And today we're going to be talking about funding and other opportunities and how to access them. This is going to be quite an overview. There's kind of a lot of different things to talk about. It'll be quite different for the different situations different artists and people in music are in. It might be that some are there as references, as things to kind of look to further down the line as part of your long-term planning. But we definitely get a lot of questions asking about what other opportunities are available. And we're going to try and do as wide an overview as possible. So if this is the first Insight session that you have accessed from us, this is part of a 5-session series around how to manage different aspects of your music career. We've already done 3 sessions. So we've done one on getting release ready, one on managing your royalties, and one on promoting yourself and your music. And they are all available to watch. Currently, they're available to watch back through our Launchpad Opportunities page and our blog. And they will be for a wider publicly available on YouTube shortly. If you are accessing this and you can't find the others, then do just drop us an email. If you're watching this before our last session, that is in 2 weeks from the date it is right now, which is the 9th of August. And our final session will be on getting out there and playing live and how to access different live opportunities. And these have all been delivered by myself and other members of our Launchpad team, notably Scott Lewis, who's our lead mentor. So if you've not met me yet, I am, most people call me Whiskers, or Sam, and I am the founder and director of Launchpad, which runs out of our Music Lead / Music Local organisation, which works to support the music sector across Yorkshire. I'm also involved in a number of other projects, so a lot of the content I've put together as these sessions come from my background as a lecturer on the BA Music Industries Management course at Leeds Beckett University. I also, very useful for today, I'm also an advisor for a number of funders, a number of national funders in the music sector. So that is with PRS Foundation, Help Musicians and Youth Music. I'm in a lucky position where I review various applications through those funders and often sit on panels where we discuss where support goes through them. And I do all of this now from my previous life, where I have run a record label. I've been a touring and signed musician, been a record producer, and I have been a promoter and venue manager. So I've had dealings with various, most, I guess, different aspects of the music industry in, as I like to say, my previous life. Okay. So, as I said at the start, we're going to go through various funds and opportunities that are available to people in Yorkshire to support the development of their music careers and their passions in terms of music. Now, when I was putting this together, there was a debate around whether to talk about what a traditional music industry funding would be, which would be, of course, access to funds through record labels, publishers, or music management. Essentially, the idea of getting signed, but that's quite a fragmented conversation. It's about kind of potentially knowing the ecology. Some of it can be quite genre specific. So we're going to focus today on what has developed over the last 10 to 20 years, which is this kind of group of national and local, national funders and local support organizations who've got a number of schemes, grants, programs that are there to support people in music develop their projects and help them with career development. Some of it is around, the first half of it is going to be around specifically on funding, around kind of access to money. But then we're going to talk about I'll talk about a number of sort of talent development programs that can support you. And maybe that's not financially based, but it will give you, other resources to do that as well. And I do have to mention that, of course, we're delivering this as Launchpad, and we very much see ourselves as kind of a core part of that for artists across Yorkshire as well. We are lucky enough that currently we're able to offer a small amount of funding towards making new recordings or developing a project, and obviously we do mentoring and other kind of things as well. I mean, this whole talk is part of trying to develop and support people in the music sector. So don't forget about us, as well as we're going to talk about all the kind of bigger picture stuff through today. So before I lead into talking about what the kind of main funds or main funders are for music across the UK, just a little bit of advice really in terms of how to approach going after funding. Because as I said, I'm lucky enough to have looked at a number of applications across a number of different funds, and also through Launchpad, we advise a number of artists and other people in music around what around funding bids that they might want to write. And often we find that it really is dependent on the timing of the project and how well the project specifically fits into what the fund is asking for. Because as we'll go through, everything has its own specific angle. It's after a very specific, they're all after specific things, and for people who are at a specific place in their career, or even specific place in the cycle of their career, which can be important. Is it, where are you in terms of an album campaign, and how much can that fund, support you? The competition for funds can often have a big impact as well. People can often get downhearted at not being successful in applying for funding, but we know some excellent artists and some excellent projects that sometimes get knocked back because of the things that we've just said. Or just where they're at in terms of the time scale of things. So, which kind of brings to the next point is actually the last point really is it's all about a plan. If you've got a plan that's broad and it's constantly being updated, you can potentially apply it to all the different kind of funds that might come up in different bits. And it might be a case that sometimes you have to say that a fund that is available is not necessarily asking for the thing that you need help for at that point. You can have a great project, but the timing doesn't always work, or the objectives with where a fund is at. Hopefully, looking through things today, you'll see, watching this, that there are lots of different funds. They cover various different aspects, and understanding which might be best for you and in the development of your plan, of your timeline. And some of it might not start for a year or two on the line. You might have to develop parts of your own creativity, but you can see how you might be able to access them as part of your own career development. So to start off with, I'm going to cover the main national funders for kind of new music projects in the UK. And I suppose specifically with a focus on Yorkshire, as we keep saying, and something like Arts Council. If you are watching this, if you have dialed into this from somewhere outside of Yorkshire, this bit might be relevant. Arts Council England only operate in England. There are restrictions on other funds depending on where else you are, but these certainly are all applicable if you're based in Yorkshire. So the main four really are PRS Foundation, Help Musicians, Arts Council England, and Youth Music. And I'll just talk a bit about what each of them do and what their main funding streams are at present. And so again, wary of this potentially getting dated, but at present in July 2022. So starting off with PRS Foundation. Now they are the UK's leading charitable funder of new music and talent development across all genres in the UK. And they have quite a high profile in terms of the work that they do. They are separate. They're operated separately to PRS for Music, the group that collects the royalties. But they were originally established with a funding stream from them, which hence the link. PRS Foundation has funded a wide range of both artists and organisations, and that includes a number of kind of the news today we're saying is that there's a number of Mercury Music Prize nominated albums. So Little Sims and Yard Act have been funded by PRS Foundation, as well as Arlo Parks, Ghost Poet, Public Service Broadcasting, and Years and Years as well. And they're really wide range of funding across all kinds of genres, across all parts of the UK as well. So here's a list of some of the main funds that PRS Foundation operates. Now the headline funds are the Momentum Fund, and we are lucky in Yorkshire that we have a feeder fund for that, which is called the Momentum Accelerator, and I'll break that down for you shortly. The Open Fund is their main fund that covers kind of a bit of everything. And attached to that with similar deadlines and a similar process is their Women Make Music Fund, which is targeted at women and people of marginalised genders. They also, in the last couple of years, have established a program called Power Up, which is a combination of peer network support and grant funding targeted at Black music creators and music professionals. That has just been announced of the second cohort of that, the second year of that program. There are a number of targeted and genre-specific funds that they run. So Hitmaker and Composer are regular funds. Composer is aimed at more traditional composers as opposed to more contemporary songwriters, whereas Hitmaker is aimed at producers, studio-based songwriters. So it still has to be people who are making new music, but again, it's aimed at those who are doing more collaborative songwriting, usually in a studio environment as well. There are also sort of time-specific funds. So the main one is the Orem Awards, which is an annual fund aimed at experimental, female and non-binary and people of marginalised gender music creators. There's also just announced one around Resonate, which is and Beyond Borders, which is exchanging music programs across borders as well. So these things tend to come up slightly more ad hoc than those main funds listed at the top of this screen. So as I said, the headline fund is the Momentum Fund, and that is sponsored and supported by PPL. So it's sometimes referred to as the PPL Momentum Fund, and that is the kind of biggest fund that PRS Foundation offers to new artists, which is up to £15,000. And this fund is for whether an artist has a team in place ready to take advantage of stepping up to the next level. They're at a breaking point, a tipping point, and with this fund, it will allow them to take a step up within the music industry and really kind of enter the mainstream. I mentioned some of the artists earlier who, most of the artists I mentioned earlier as having been supported by PRS Foundation have come through this fund. And in Yorkshire, we've had a number of artists come through. So Polo, Yard Act, Life, Hookworms, Fizzy Blood, Menace Beach, Coco, and a number of others as well. The definition I just said, in terms of it being around an artist having a team and being at a tipping point, can though obviously limit its accessibility to some artists, especially based in Yorkshire, where it's perhaps a little bit harder to get a manager or a record label than it is, especially if you're based in London and the South. And so as part of that, PRS Foundation has looked to develop a sort of feeder fund called the Momentum Accelerator Fund, which we kind of support with them as well. We kind of bring the funding for that as well. And this is a smaller fund. The fund is just up to £5,000. There is a ring-fenced fund just for Yorkshire artists. They've just announced one for Welsh artists, and there is one for Liverpool artists as well. But each one has its own kind of little pot, because that's how it works. And the idea is it's for an artist again at a tipping point, but maybe they don't have as many of those core elements. They haven't quite been able to put a team together, but they're really, really showing potential. We've had some fantastic success with this in Yorkshire. So the big success is a band called English Teacher, who came through and recently played Glastonbury and signed to a major label, but across various genres. So Downtown Kyoto and Chado Araka from Hull, Team Picture, Simeon Walker from Leeds, and various others. This has kind of really helped them get forward. But it is artists at a level. Most of these artists are getting national airplay, playing festivals, maybe not as big as Glastonbury to begin with, but kind of really reaching out there. Now, both these funds, Momentum Fund currently has 4 deadlines a year, and Momentum Accelerator has 2. PRS Foundation are just working on what the next deadlines are, but there's an expectation that the next Momentum deadline will be in late summer, so towards the end of August, maybe September. But the Momentum Accelerator Fund is likely to be around October, November. And of course, if you are signed up to the Launchpad mailing list and the Launchpad socials, we will let you know when those deadlines are open or have been announced as well. The other main PRS Foundation fund is the Open Fund. So there are 2 different parts of the Open Fund. There's the Open Fund for organisations and the Open Fund for music creators. For organisations, you can apply for up to £10,000, and for music creators, up to £5,000. You can also apply for Women Make Music, which follows a similar pattern, like it's a similar kind of application process to them, and it's the same deadline. So the deadline for all of these upcoming is the 14th of September. This is a really wide open program. It's around programs that will have a national impact or reach a unique audience, and that means that kind of all kinds of different people will apply to these funds, and that does mean that it's really, really competitive as well. So if your project aligns with what these funds want, which because they're so broad, it's quite likely you'll be able to fit something in. It is just worth thinking about where the timeline adds and what the specific ask is that you're trying to do for them as well. Because it is such a broad program, they have a really, really high level of applicants as well. So I won't go into too much detail about the other specific funds from PRS Foundation. I'll just get back a sec. The Orem Awards is currently open for applications as well. So for music creators in making of female or of marginalised genders making experimental music, that's one to look at. And the composer and hitmaker funds do come around regularly, and therefore between £5,000 and £10,000 as well. So if you're working in those genres, it is worth looking at those specifically too. So I'll move on next to Help Musicians. And Help Musicians is the leading UK charity for musicians of all genres, from starting out to retirement. And it's worth making a distinction there with PRS Foundation, because PRS Foundation primarily focuses around music creation. So with the Composers Fund and Hitmaker, that's around creating new music, composing and songwriting, whereas Help Musicians is more about the musicians themselves, so performing. It doesn't necessarily have to be original material within that. So that's more what Help Musicians is geared towards. The Help Musicians programs, it's broken down in quite a targeted way, as I'll go through. And the really interesting thing about the Help Musicians program is that they are open all the time with a rolling deadline. That means there is no that you can apply today, tomorrow, in a month's time, in 3 months' time. There is no kind of cut-off point for applications. Now, word of warning, the problem with that is it does mean that a lot of the people we support lack the urgency to apply, that keeps drifting further and further down the line because there's nothing to kind of force them to get it in by a set point in time. So, of course, that can be tricky. So it is really worth kind of imposing almost like your own deadlines for it, so it doesn't kind of get out of hand. The selection panels for this run, I think, pretty much every month. So even though there's no deadline, like every month, Help Musicians will collect all the applications that come in and review them. And there is a relatively good success rate for projects. Obviously, they can't support everything. It's definitely, more things don't get funded than do get funded. But it definitely seems, compared to some of the other funders, that they are able to support a good number of applications. Another word of warning is that, again, with this idea that it's a rolling deadline, is it does take them 3 months to kind of look at all the applications. So when you apply, you do need to have made sure that your project starts at least 3 months after the point in which you submit, because what often happens with applications that get rejected is that they apply for a project that will start in 6 to 8 weeks, but actually they can't then review that because they know that they won't get the decision back until that point in time. So always give yourself lots and lots of time, especially with Help Musicians, in order to dictate what your timeline will be. So taking a look at the specific funds that are available through Help Musicians, the main one that's been running for a while, which used to be called Do It Differently, is now been renamed as Recording and Releasing Music. And that kind of does exactly what it says in the tin. That's a pot for up to £3,000 to support you recording and releasing your music. So that can mean help to support for the marketing, support for the creation, for studio time, and similar things, PR and things like that. Now, another of the funds that does a very similar thing is the MOBO Help Musicians Fund. So that supports the same kind of recording and releasing music but for artists who are making music of Black origin as defined by the MOBO Awards. As I said, the support is the same. That's up to £3,000 again. It's for artists who are looking to record and release their music. It's just there for artists working in the Mobo genres. And so, yeah, hopefully a plan for them will be relatively self-evident. A brand new fund from Help Musicians is the Touring and Live Fund, which is actually, I think, is quite exciting because it's a little bit different to some of the other funds that we see. And this is up to £5,000 to support touring and live activities. Now, one of the challenges with that fund seems to be that it takes you 3 months to get a decision. So you potentially need to have the tour planned quite far in advance and with enough time to either take advantage of getting the funding or to mitigate it. And of course, you also need, for all the funds, you need to budget them appropriately and make sure all of that is robust, which of course can sometimes be a little bit tougher with touring, especially at the minute with kind of variable fees in terms of the amount it costs you for fuel and hotels and things like that. But that is a brand new fund, so hardly any artists have been supported with it. I think they've just announced a couple of rounds of people who've been supported through that so far. So really interesting to see how that one goes. The other two main funds, part of the Help Musicians Creative Programme, is Develop Your Skills and the Music-Led Creative Collaboration Fund. Now, these are a little bit more specific than the ones I've just mentioned, but certainly the Develop Your Skills, we come across lots of artists who would really benefit from that. It's a smaller fund. It's only up to £1,500, but it does what it says on the tin. It's about developing your skills. It's not about necessarily about creating new music or developing a project, but if you want to develop, say, production skills, songwriting skills, you want to develop marketing skills, you want to go to conferences and network, this is a fund that you can apply for to be able to do that as a musician. The final one here, the Music-Led Creative Collaboration, it's a bigger fund. It's £5,000. It's a little bit nuanced because it's to support collaboration, generally with non-musicians. So there's been things around sustainability, with video making, I've seen things with food. It can be really exciting pot of money to create new works and new performances, but it does have to have that collaborative element to it in order to access that funding. Again, like PRS Foundation, there's some genre-specific funds, so specifically funds around jazz, theatre and opera, because Help Musicians is quite broad, as well as some postgraduate awards to support ongoing studies. So if you are looking at doing a postgraduate study in music, then it is worth looking into what the support Help Musicians can give as well. Some of these funds are quite successful. The jazz one specifically, a number of artists from Yorkshire have been awarded in the last few years. So moving on to youth music. Youth music is the national charity that supports music making for children and young people aged 0 to 25. This is becoming increasingly relevant because of the funds that they've launched, as I'll describe, and also a huge amount of artists and people that we deal with at Launchpad are 25 and under. Youth music is also, as well as being a funder, is a fantastic resource. It has a number of resources on their website around how to build a career in the music industry. They have access to a number of industry professionals who do guides, who do webinars, who do talks. So if you've never investigated the youth music site, there really is a fantastic range of resources that could help you in all kinds of different ways in supporting your music career. Well, over the last couple of years, 2-3 years, youth music have launched a number of specific funds that are aimed at 18 to 25-year-olds. So at that point around developing a music career. And I guess the landmark one of that is the Next Gen Fund, which is open to young creatives aged between 18 to 25. And it's a grant pot of up to £2,500. And it can be for artists, it can be for entrepreneurs, it can be for people wanting to create platforms to support new talent as well. So it's really quite innovative fund as well. There's just been a deadline for this. I think the deadline was maybe 6 to 8 weeks ago. And so looking now that the next time this will open is in autumn 2022. And I think the plan is that this will run 2 or 3 times every year. But as I say, the next one will be later in the year. So that the Next Gen Fund is accessible directly by 18 to 25-year-olds, and most of the other Youth Music Fund is actually there for organisations to support 18 to 25-year-olds. But a specific mention is worth there for the Incubator Fund. So the Incubator Fund is for organisations to get from £5,000 to £30,000 to create sustainable, meaningful career opportunities for young people aged 18 to 25. So again, there's been a relatively recent deadline for that, about 6 to 8 weeks ago. So the next one won't be until later this year, till December, it says, according to their website. But it is worth looking out for schemes supported through Incubator. So in previous years, there's been a number of Yorkshire-based successful applicants. So Young Thugs in York have run a scheme to support female, non-binary and marginalised gender producers. Can Play With Me have run a programme, Long Division have hired a team, and BCB Radio have also done a supporting programme with that as well. So it's worth looking at projects that might emerge over the next few months that have been supported by Incubator Funds. The main 2 funds for organisations, though, are the Trailblazer Fund and the Catalyst Fund. The main difference between them is the scale and the scope. So Trailblazer is just up to £30,000, but the Catalyst Fund is for above that. And they are generally for organisations to support children and young people who face barriers to making, learning and earning from music. So if you are an organisation, these funds could be accessible to you. There is a deadline just this week for the Trailblazer Fund. But after that, they will both be open again in November this year. So finally, of the national funders, I'm going to talk about Arts Council. So Arts Council England are, of course, kind of the biggest. They are the kind of government-denoted funder of arts in England. And they support individuals and organisations with public funding, as well as donations from National Lottery. And their current mission is to deliver their current strategy, which is called Let's Create. And within Let's Create, it talks about making sure that everyone's creativity is given the chance to flourish. We all have access to a remarkable range of high quality cultural experiences. And that's a very, very broad remit, and it is worth thinking about what that might mean from yourself as an artist or an organisation's point of view, and how, if you are going to apply to Arts Council, it's very much worth looking at some of the detail within Let's Create to give yourself the best chance of applying to them. And as an artist or an organisation, the main 2 routes that Arts Council has for you to apply is through their project grants fund and their fund entitled Developing Your Creative Practice. So their project grants fund is, coincidentally enough, based around projects. It can be very useful for touring projects or interactive live events or installations as critical pieces of work. Projects can also be like album campaigns, but if you're thinking about what we just talked about, their strategy is it's got to show how the work is accessible and how it's allowing everyone to kind of have access to high quality music. And that is something that has kind of changed a little bit since they introduced the Let's Create strategy earlier this year. That means there's a different dimension for it. But we have previously seen, artists fund touring work or project / album delivery through previous project grants. So it has been possible. Arts Council, funding through Arts Council England is often considered tricky because there is a very involved application form. It is just very detailed, and there are essentially lots of boxes to tick. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but because it's for all different art forms and all different forms of culture, there are a lot of different options really to deal with. So it can definitely, if you are looking into Arts Council and project grants, it is worth giving yourself time to take a long look at it. There's a huge amount of detail available through Arts Council's website. Launchpad has previously published webinars around the funds, just really arming yourself with as much details as possible. So the funds are always open, and for a grant fund of asked for under £30,000, they will turn around a decision in 8 weeks, and if it's over £30,000, it's 12 weeks. So that is kind of comparable, if not better, with some of the other funders, but the process is much more involved and much more rigorous. If you are coming to Arts Council as an artist and looking to apply, it is worth thinking about when, again, the right time in the cycle is to apply, because there will be an expectation that various things are kind of underway, but obviously you can demonstrate the need for other bits of funding. So again, in an album campaign, it can be tricky to talk about that, but it is still possible. The Developing Your Creative Practice Fund is relatively new. I think it's been around for about 4 years now, and this definitely seems to be a more accessible funding route, certainly for individual practitioners, individual artists, individual musicians. It is about developing your own art and creative work and not just about project delivery. But we do know that from feedback, it can be hard to pull those two things about. And again, there is quite a lot of resources around how to do that, and webinars, and we have them on our site around how to approach developing your creative practice grant. It is worth noting that a really wide range of people have been successful in receiving this, from programmers to guitarists to sound designers to electronic music producers to tour managers and more. It can encompass a really broad number of people within what it talks about, and the application form is much more pared back than the one in which I described for project grants. If you are established and looking to develop your practice, it is a really, really good opportunity to look into. It's not as wide open as, in terms of the deadlines aren't as kind of open as project grants. There are deadlines. They do kind of, I think there's usually around 3 or 4 deadlines a year. The next one will open in September 2022. It's likely that it'll be open for about 4 or 5 weeks before there's a deadline. And it is for up to £10,000 for you to spend on developing your practice. That can be to access resources, advice, mentors, courses, again, and tools that you need to do that developing of your creative practice. One of the good things about Arts Council, if it feels a little bit distant, is that if you go on their website, all the previously funded artists and projects, both from project grants and developing your creative practice, are publicly available in a database from their website. That is across all of Arts Council, but you can filter it by art forms and regions. So you can pull off a spreadsheet and look at who's getting funded in music in whatever region, either in Yorkshire in general or in the specific place that you're from. And you might find it really interesting to look a little bit into those for inspiration as well. One final note here, I think for me to mention as anything else, is that to apply for Arts Council England, you use a platform called Grantium. One of the things that catches a few people out with Arts Council is that there is often a delay in setting up a profile. So in order to apply for Grantium, you need to create a profile, and that can sometimes take up to a week to be approved. And if the fund you are doing is time specific, like with developing your creative practice, that is something that you will need to factor in as well. So moving on briefly from those national big funders as well, I'm going to talk about a few things that are available and out there more locally and in the Yorkshire region as well. So the first thing I really want to flag is the network of PRS Foundation's talent development partners. So the talent development partnership from PRS Foundation is a network of organisations doing similar work across the UK, of which Launchpad is one. But depending on where you might be based in Yorkshire, there are a number of others that you might be able to find support from. So there's Higher Rhythm in Doncaster, the Warren in Hull, Can Play With Me in Leeds, that's based out of Leeds but works across mainly West Yorkshire. There is Opera North, which is based in Leeds, again works across Yorkshire. The same goes for South Asian Arts. And also Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival. And all those organisations will work, obviously have a specific geographical focus, but will also kind of work in other specific genres as well. As well as those organisations that are co-funded by PRS Foundation, which I always like to kind of give a special mention to, there are a number of local initiatives as well. that work to support either artists or people wanting to work in the music industry. Now, this list is not exhaustive, and the parameters of what I'm talking about is really quite broad as well. And so I've tried to lean away from some that are more around like music education and working with kind of under 18s. But so this was an initial list, at least, of kind of local initiatives to support artists and career development in music. So Saving Grace is doing quite a bit of work to support that around Huddersfield and the Kirklees Year of Music. Pattern and Push is a great program that based out of Sheffield. Long Division have done that work in Wakefield. Sable Radio and Young Thugs have both offered kind of internship roles and other development opportunities. Black Health Initiative have ran the Black Music Festival and Sign program and the 32 Bars program. Sounds of Scarborough is a support network. Bradford Producing Hub has a mentoring and grant funding stream. And Yorkshire Sound Women Network, again, supports creatives as well as a number of ambassadors. So they will all offer support in different ways, but if you are looking, and that obviously doesn't cover the entirety of Yorkshire, but hopefully, at least from the start of this conversation, you can see that there is support kind of throughout the region in lots of different ways. It's also worth looking. So those organisations mainly offer support as opposed to funding, but you might often find that your local council will have different small grants pots. These will come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. Some will only support non-for-profit activity. Some will be about projects and not about artistic programme, but they do exist in like lots of places. So in Leeds, through Leeds Inspired, Bradford Council have cultural grants. Wakefield has just launched a grants programme. We've supported a project in Rydale that this council have supported around rural village concerts, and Hull also has a grants programme. Those are just ones that we know of. I'm sure, again, if you start talking to your local culture teams, you might find that there is some kind of accessible funding available. Again, it's not always for artists themselves, but it might be to fund projects as well. So again, it depends what you're really looking at. So following on from stuff that's genre specific and with a little bit of a lean on what I was talking about from the PRS Foundation, is there are a number of genre and wider regional, so really think about the North, specific organisations depending on what kind of music you're making. So Jazz North and Jazz Refreshed will work across the whole of Jazz North in the North and Jazz Refreshed in the UK to support diverse jazz music. United Development supports R&B and rap music. Sound of Music and Sound UK. Experimental music, Brownswood, Future Bubblers feeds through to that label as well. They will all have a presence, or they've all supported artists from the Yorkshire region as well. Generator is based in Newcastle, Sage and Gateshead, and Brighter Sound out of Manchester are all worth looking at as well, because they all run schemes that are accessible by artists across all of the North as well. And thinking about it, not mentioned is Liverpool Sound City have also started branching away from just supporting artists in the Northwest to run programs in across the wider North as well. And again, there might be things that I've kind of missed, but we're trying to be give as much of an insight as possible. And I'm sure I've got a slide that will remind me about this in a minute. But again, anything that Launchpad finds that would be relevant and accessible and useful for someone trying to build a career in Yorkshire, we will shout about it on our channels, on our mailing list, on our opportunities page. Some things come and go quite quickly, and that's why we always advise people to check out our social media channels. Sometimes we don't know when deadlines are. We tried to be useful today with pointing out when that is. Sometimes just comes up, and it's a really great opportunity. And if you are looking at what we put on socials, we will always try and shout about it as much as is possible. So before I wind up, there's been a big focus here on kind of funders and other opportunities here. And this isn't a funder, but I do think it's very important to recognise the support and the work that BBC Music Introducing does. You will probably be aware of the Music Introducing Uploader, which allows you to upload new music to get played on the BBC radio stations. But there is also a number of really great resources on their website as well. So it's definitely worth looking at all of that. And finally, as I said at the start, don't forget us. We know many people who are accessing this call will have had first-hand experience of the support that Launchpad offers, the direct support we have with artists, the events, the workshops, and the conferences that we do, the one-to-ones that you can book on, the support and resource on releasing and funding, as well as the kind of constant updating of opportunities. If you can't find something through us that you want to access, then we really, really just encourage you to reach out to us. We have our bi-weekly drop-in sessions, and as we've talked about on a previous call as well, we have Launchpad that can provide direct support for managing your releases and royalty collection as well. So do feel free to get in touch with us through that. So that's all I've got to run through today. Hopefully it's a really useful overview on what kind of funding and opportunities is available for people based around Yorkshire. Hopefully there has been some useful little insights in terms of how to approach those funds. Hopefully I've been able to give some insight in terms of like how different they all are. So it's been quite hard to dive directly into all of them without making this video kind of twice as long. But as I've tried to direct, there are a number of webinars and resources available for each and every one of those funds that you are able to access. So if you can kind of take this overview and gain an insight in terms of when and where and how any of these opportunities might be available to you, there is certainly quite a lot of like bespoke follow-on support, either from those organizations or from someone like us, that we can do as well. So hopefully you found that useful. The final session in this series will be delivered by Scott in 2 weeks today. So I hope you enjoy that. Thank you very much.